Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Urban Blueprint, a podcast created by the UVic Real Estate Club to help educate students about the real estate industry. We are very excited to introduce today's guest, innovative academic leader, civil engineer, and UVic's president and vice chancellor. Please welcome Kevin Hall to the show. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah. Now we got a huge live audience with us here.
Fantastic.
Yeah. No, this is really awesome. We really appreciate you doing this. I think this is a really cool chance to give the students a look at UVic strategies, UVic's mindset on things, your view on everything.
Yeah.
And again, just really appreciate this.
You're assuming we have a strategy.
I guess so, yeah. Well, I guess we'll just jump right into it. I know one thing we've been wondering as students, we're young, we're entering the rental market, lack of credit history, lack of rental histories in the past. We were just wondering, how is UVic addressing the inequalities surrounding students in the rental market and how you guys are approaching that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And first of all, we of course can't control the rental market in Victoria. So landlords are going to charge what they can get.
Yeah.
This whole country is going crazy with rents. So our solution, we think the way forward for us is to continue to build on campus, our residences. We're now up to about 3,000 places in residence. We're going to get another 500, we think, but we're also now looking at our outlying lands. If we can somehow get involved in the development of those lands and work with developers to specify what kind of housing we want, we think we can target some of the housing towards our students, our grads and grad students. And if we work with the right developer, we'll be able to control the rent. But of course, developers, when they give you money, they also want to make as much money as they can as well. So it's a really fine edge balance. And unfortunately, universities don't have the ability to build their own housing.
Right.
We don't have, I don't know, half a $1 billion sitting there to build a 20-story apartment building. So we have to work with people who have the funds. So typically is working with developers because the province doesn't provide cash for that. They do provide cash for example, for our residences on campus. They provide us a little bit of money towards that, and they allow us to carry a little bit of debt, but that's very limited in scope. And so if we're going to start doing something big, and for me, it's can we do 2,000 or 3,000 housing units close to campus? We're going to have that conversation with the province around our ability to carry debt and our ability to actually secure funding, whether it's from a developer or now with a new federal government program that's just been announced that universities can now apply for some of the funding that's available for housing. That's just announced this week, and that's potentially a bit of a game changer for us if we're allowed to borrow money.
100%. And then when you say about developing student housing, is that how close in proximity to university are you looking? Is it an across the city thing, or is it really focused on near UVic?
It's absolutely focused near UVic. And so we have two particular sites we're looking at right now, and the first one, which we'll go ahead with, is at what's called the Ian Stewart Complex. It's literally across Mackenzie, probably about 500 meters from where we're sitting. So it's close, and I think that's one of the advantages of the university doing this on their land is nobody wants to take a bus or walk 3 or 4K to get to school every day. Well, some people do, but not everybody. So we want to take advantage of that proximity. And in doing the housing, we also think we can construct a little bit of infrastructure that's of interest to students because it is a bit of a boring area of the city. I don't know if you've noticed in your years here, right? So, we wanted to do housing, and we want to do housing, perhaps a restaurant, perhaps a coffee shop and some grocery stores, or things that would be amenable to making it a better place to kind of live.
Right. It's almost like building a micro community.
Within building a little village.
I see. Yeah. So can you just explain a bit more about the Ian Stewart redevelopment for those who may not know, timeline-wise, or when it may be?
Well, time-wise, I'd say it could take place anytime between 4 o'clock this afternoon and 2090.
Right.
Universities typically don't move very quickly, and there's all kinds of other things that come into play. So we started this process about a year ago, and the starting point for us is to work with the municipalities because UVic is bordered by 2 municipalities, Oak Bay to the south side of the campus, west side of the campus, southwest, and Sngequ on the other side of the campus. And the Ian Stewart Complex is in Sngequ. And so we have to work with the city of Sngequ to get zoning permission. So for example, on our own campus, we're limited to the heights of buildings being 2 stories. So when you look around, you see a lot of 2-story buildings, right?
Yeah.
To get the residence over here done, which was 9 and 11 stories, it was a 3-year process to go through with Sngequ to get them to agree to build that size. And that's because there's a lot of residents around who don't want tall buildings.
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. The Ian Stewart property is a little bit different, and then it's a little more remote than where our residences are, but we still have to go at this point in time through that process. And so we've started conversations with Sngequ. We are building our own master plan for this. We're working with some developers to get some ideas around what is sellable, what is rentable for this market if they're going to put the money in. And so we're trying to do this master plan for this piece of property, which is 7 acres at the Ian Stewart complex, and actually another 2 acres across the street where the fire hall is. So we actually own the land that the fire hall is on. And we've talked to Sngequ about redeveloping the fire hall with the concept of having a fire hall on the first couple of floors, and then maybe another 6 to 10 stories of units on top of that. And so that's something the City of Victoria has done. And so far, it's gone very slowly.
Yeah,
with Sngequ.
That would be interesting.
So it'd be really interesting, right? And so that by far is our biggest concern with speed, is the ability of municipalities to approve these projects. And they go through a number of different phases. And so we've got a couple of alternative approaches we think might work, where we're working with the province to see if we can get the zoning accelerated. The province has stepped in a number of jurisdictions in BC in the last year, and actually said, no, we're actually going to approve this project. And that's taking it out of the hands of the municipality, which is not always the greatest thing to do either, because we want to be good neighbors, right?
Of course, yeah, especially
we don't want to get everybody
relationship.
So in a perfect scenario where we could get zoning approvals quickly, we might have units there in 2 to 2.5 years.
Okay, cool.
At the speed things typically work, it might be 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's not a short-term solution for us, but it's one that we think would put quite a few units in the hands of students at reasonable rent prices. Again, we have to work with the right partner.
Yeah, 100%. And just with that, is there any frustration with the length and how long these things take?
Yeah, so for me, there's always frustration, because nothing ever happens fast enough for me. But I happen to be like somebody who's impatient. Yeah. But I recognize there's, and I say that in jest, and I do want things to happen quickly. But there are so many pieces of doing this development that have to be looked at.
Yeah.
The environmental piece, right? We're a university that prides ourselves in environment, and so there's a watershed, the Balcor Creek watershed over near there. We want to make sure there's some green space. There are Indigenous cultural and heritage considerations to take into account. There is the community and the people in Gordon Head, and what are they going to think about having a 10, 15, 20-story building? My hope is we can go to 20 stories, because density has to be the way we go on our small chunks of property.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so those are all reasonable expectations to have to look at. And so some of those just can't be done quickly. They just take time. So like I say, I think realistically, if we could get something happening in 2.5 years, that would be absolutely incredible. That would be much quicker than awesome. Any of these buildings you see around campus. Yeah. The new residence that opened, that was 7 years in planning.
Wow.
The engineering building that's starting construction now will be 2 years of construction. That was 5 years ago when they started doing that planning and so on. So things take time, but we really do hope this will speed up. And we are also working with BC Builds. We want them to be a partner in this project, and that also may give us a little bit of access to some government pressure to move things along.
Absolutely, yeah. It's almost construction's the easiest part, right?
That's well, easy other than the cost of construction now, right? It's just going crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah, the student complex, that's going to be amazing. That's good to hear about that. And, is there any other sites that UVic has identified?
Yeah, we have a bigger piece of property down Cedar Hill Crossroads.
Oh, okay.
And so we're looking at a different concept there. We want to look at building a sustainable housing development that could be anything from townhouses to lower rise apartment buildings, maybe 6 to 8 stories maximum.
Right.
And we want that to really integrate into the environment that's there. It borders onto Mystic Vale. We would respect Mystic Vale and the environment that goes around there, but it's an open piece of land right now. It used to be called the Dog Park.
Oh, okay.
But it's just a big open piece of land. It's around 35 acres of development. And so we're really focusing on Ian Stewart for now, but that in the long term will be a much bigger project and has the potential of perhaps having 4,000 to 5,000 units down there. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be huge.
Yeah,
absolutely. You were talking about partnering with developers to make this all happen, and I was wondering, rather than just brick and mortar building it up from scratch, is there any possibility you could partner with developers to get to devote units in places downtown or other places in the city for students? Is that a possibility you've looked into or would?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say, yes, we've looked into. There's never too much interest because, again, developers are taking a piece of property, trying to extract the maximum value out of it. And so they're going, okay, well, hang on, if we do this, like, how are we going to maximize our profit?
Right.
Unfortunately.
So
that's a really tough one to crack.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, and it with these developers too, is it a thing where you're finding new developers for separate projects, or do you have long-lasting relationships with certain ones? Or
we have some good relationships with some of the local developers. Many of the local developers are fairly small-scale developers, and so we've also been talking to some of the big developers in Vancouver who do these mega projects, and they do them very quickly. And one of the really interesting partnerships is with an alumni of ours who owns a big development company in Vancouver. And he's very keen on looking at new models of housing. In fact, for the market to buy houses, he's looking at one of the first in Canada to do rent to own.
Okay.
So you can actually pay your rent for 5 years, 6 years when you don't have a down payment to buy, and that will count towards your deposit so you can actually buy the property. And so
that's huge.
They're really trying to be innovative in what they do. And so so I guess we're looking at everything from working with local developers who are on smaller scale to some of these large national development corporations. And so we'll look at what works best to give us the mix that we want. And that will include, of course, having a mix of student housing, perhaps some housing for faculty and staff, for graduate students. Everybody has different demands, and also for the community, because it's pretty clear from the government that we're here as a university and being expected to help solve the housing crisis in BC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to shift back to something you mentioned earlier too, and just with the Indigenous perspective. And obviously UVic is very forward thinking with that, and we're trying our best for reconciliation. I was just curious how that plays into the housing on campus, if it does at all.
Yeah, I think certainly in our residence, we put a lot of effort into making sure there was Indigenous specific housing and meeting rooms and things that would be supportive of Indigenous students' journey through education here. In terms of the development of our outlying land, we're actually working with the Songhees and the Sngequ nations.
Awesome.
And trying to look at what's their interest in the development, how can we respect culture and history. And one of the things that the Chief Ron Sam from the Songhees has said to us is, could you help us build capacity? Because they have properties in the city that they're looking at developing in the long term. It's a very small nation and it doesn't have a lot of expertise in development. So we're looking at a shared position, which would be somebody from Songhees Nation working with us on this project, to pick up all the skills around development and how it goes, so that they can take those skills and transfer it to their projects in the next few years.
Oh, that's awesome.
So when we were talking about that, I was actually talking about when I first came here to UVic, and I came from the Australian system where they're very used to developing their property for things like housing or commercial purposes. At UVic, we had a master plan that said all of our outlying property we need, because in 2050 or 2060 we might need a new building, and it would go on these outlying properties. My point to our team was, well, we've got 15 parking lots, that's 15 buildings. So we can actually build our new buildings, our academic buildings, our research buildings, our library, whatever it is we're going to build. We can build those on the parking lots that we have now, which means we can use those outlying lands. And so those two pieces we've been talking about, Cedar Hill and Ian Stewart Complex, were actually zoned for academic buildings.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But they're not going to be academic buildings now. So we've got lots of land on campus to expand if UVic in fact expands, right? So
no, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's the reaction to what's happening in Victoria.
For years, there was also a plan here for a multi-story car park, recognizing car parks take a lot of land. And they're flat and they're asphalt. The drainage is terrible. Environmentally, they're terrible. So that, we may resurrect that discussion at some point in time as well, to see what we can do to make the campus, I guess, a little more environmentally friendly, rather than having whatever it is, 14 or 15 parking lots that we have.
No, we do have.
We have a lot of parking lots. And we need a lot of parking. There's no doubt about it. But
So before we started even filming too, we mentioned the changes to the Canadian construction loan program that Trudeau just announced recently. I was just curious your initial reactions on that and how that would affect UVic.
So I guess we're cautiously excited.
Yeah.
We're excited by the fact that there could be some funding available to build some of this housing through the federal government at very good loan rates. I think it's typically a couple of percent below what the banks and others are charging.
Yeah.
Universities haven't had access to that before. Our problem we have in this province is that we're part of the government, and the government won't allow us to carry debt on our books because it's part of the accounting procedures that the government uses. And so us having the ability to borrow loans will take some change
Right.
in the government to recognize that we can go get this money. It's going to register as a loan or debt on the government's books.
Right.
And so as long as the government is okay, and preliminary indications talking to the Premier are we should be able to make that happen. That may take a bit of time as well, right? But it's exciting to know that there's some money out there that could be cheaper. And then it'll be a balance of, okay, do we work with a developer or do we try to do it ourselves with a loan? And what does that all mean? So we've got to look at all these different business models and just really try to figure out what works best for the institution, what will work the quickest, and what will give us the result we want to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be a huge change. The loans and multiple, even past student housing, I'd imagine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So we also had some fan questions.
Okay,
we posted on our Instagram to ask people, our followers, to see what they may want to ask you. And one of them was, how is space on campus optimized to reflect the high demand for student housing?
I would say, first of all, we've got a ton of space, right?
Yeah.
All you have to do is look around this campus.
Yeah.
The campus was designed to be like a very open campus, lots of green space, and so people have not wanted to look at different places for space. But I would say in terms of space for student residents, there's so much space left. It's our capacity to build. It's our capacity to get funding that really is the thing that's holding us back. And so it's not a question of prioritizing other things over student space. There is more than enough space here to build however much student space or student residence we could actually afford to build.
Yeah.
So, a space in general is at a premium in the buildings we have because we don't have the capacity to build other buildings. This is not, the universities rely on government grants to build buildings and government funding and the subsidies. And so this government has been generous to us in that we've got the new National Centre for Indigenous Law. We've got the engineering complex that's being funded primarily by the government. So we have lots of land. We just don't have the capital to build the space. And so I don't think there's no issues on campus in building more residences. In fact, we've got our next project, which is 500 more beds. Yeah. That's already developed, almost designed, and it's sitting on the desk with the government. It will be assessed in 2025 for funding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Long process.
Yeah, it's a long process.
Yeah. Would the quad, would the quad ever be an option for that, or is that something?
I'd probably say the quad wouldn't. It's one of these sacred parts of an institution is having something like a quad. But there's so much space around the campus, right? And there's even some issues we have with some of the resident stock that we have now. It's old. It's fallen down. And it takes a lot of maintenance to keep it going. And so there are sites where we might actually take down one of the existing residences and put up some new residences, as we did with the two new residences there, right? It's really taking care of two problems. One was a decaying infrastructure and creating a brand new experience for students.
Yeah, and I think touching on those would be valuable too, I think, since they're so new on the campus. I guess just what was the vision with those, and how have they been successful so far? They've
been fantastic. They both from the design of the rooms and the layout of the actual residence pieces, which was a little bit of a new style for us.
Yeah.
They've been absolutely fantastic. And then the fact that we incorporated teaching classrooms, meeting space, food services into those residences has been fantastic success. We think we haven't heard a lot of negative things out of it, other than sometimes the food doesn't taste as good as it perhaps should. Some people say, but I eat over there. It's all right.
Yeah. Touching on that is interesting. Actually, is there anything what has been the reaction with? I know I've heard student voices talk about the concerns with the food, or maybe pricing or whatnot. Is there anything?
I would say there absolutely have been concerns voiced to us, as there are at UBC and where I used to work at Queens and Guelph. I think food is always something at the heart of students, empowering students, and it's either too expensive or it's not very good, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we as a university try to find that balance We try to be sustainable as well, so that means we source a lot of our food locally. We don't want to import. We don't want McDonald's to set up on campus where they import their burgers from Brazil, and we think that doesn't contribute to a good planet. So it's a balancing act we have, and we do listen to what people say about the food, and we try to make changes.
Right? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so just shifting to another follow-up question here. Yeah. So, how do you think the Canada's international student cap will impact Victoria's housing crisis?
I don't think it'll change it at all, quite frankly. What's going to happen, I think, with the cap, BC has a lot of international students, but 80% of them are on the mainland. Right. UVic, we're a very small percentage. We're about 11% of our student population is international. With the new caps, we'll actually get the same allocation of students as we do now.
I see.
So I don't think it will have an impact in the market in Victoria and on the island in particular. And certainly Cheko'nien and Royal Roads are the same as us. We're all very small compared to something like a UBC that has 20,000 international students.
Yeah.
So we have 1,700 international students, and that number is unlikely to change significantly. It might go up and down 500 or so over the next few years, but it shouldn't have a big impact.
Yeah. So just circling back to, we talked about devoting units to students off campus and how that may be a challenge. Is there any ideas to build buildings elsewhere off campus, or is it?
Yeah, apart from the 2 pieces of land that we actually own, that of course would involve buying land, right? And land's extremely expensive in Victoria. It's not sort of within the realms of what the university can do. We're not cashed up to do that kind of thing. But we do things like we're working with a couple of property owners down at the corner of Mackenzie and Shelburne, where there's some new facilities going, and we have got them to agree that a certain percentage of their units they will rent to students.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so that's the kinds of things we can do and try to influence off the campus. And so there is, I believe, a couple of new buildings going up in that area. Now there's one just finished. I think it was 150 units or something, and there's about another 600 or 700 units going in there. And so we're working with those developers to say, could you kind of reserve whatever it is, 20%, 25% for students. And so far, the one group we've talked to were very receptive to that. They won't all be, but we're very hopeful. We do work through our housing group to identify people that have basement flats, or they have, flats in the backyard. And so we always try to scour the local neighborhoods and encourage people to post their housing on our housing boards. And I think what's happened is, during the pandemic in 2020, that housing stock kind of got pulled away. People all of a sudden didn't want strangers staying in their homes. And then as people sort of went to working remotely, they went, that studio I had out in the backyard, that could be my new office, right? And so that has been removed. But now as more people are going back to work, we're starting to see some of that housing stock return. And so we're always working with the neighborhoods around here to try to look at, just where can we get housing for students?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I know two with students is transportation. And there's been some new provincial legislations around zoning and transit, and building more housing volume or housing density around transit. And I was curious if that'll affect UVic in any way.
We hope it will, and we think it will, because the regulation is 800 meters within the transit hub. So we have the biggest transit hub in Victoria right here on campus, the busiest. It's kind of 800 meters to the Union Stewart.
Right.
If you kind of measure it like a bird flies, if you measure it on the road, it's quite a bit longer. Yeah. And then, the reality is for those transit hub sites, they can have double the height that is currently put on the property.
Right.
Now, if you remember, I said we have 2 stories.
Right.
And so that means we can go 4 stories, which is nowhere near enough. So it's going to help, but it's not going to help a ton at this point in time. We hope actually working with the municipality and the provincial government, we're actually going to be allowed to build much higher than that. And quite frankly, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be going 16 to 20 stories over, particularly on the Ian Stewart complex, because it's next door to a high school, next door to a fire station. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of residential, low density residential around. There's a bit of medium density housing around, but I think, if we do the project right and it looks good, should get some acceptance in the community.
Yeah, 100%. That with the stories, that's a really interesting point, because it's obviously where we all know where Victoria is. You can't go out, so going up really is the solution.
Yeah.
And I just touching on Victoria too. How has the housing crisis here in Victoria really has housing always been this much of a priority for the university, or has it been heightened recently?
Yeah, so I've been here 3 years, so
Yeah.
I can't answer the long
Yeah.
term, but I have my suspicions of Victoria's always been expensive.
Yeah.
It's it's a place that people want to come to in Canada,
Mm.
particularly as you get older and you want to retire,
Yeah.
which drives up the housing prices, which drives up the rental costs, and so I think Victoria in general has always been towards the top of the country in terms of its rental. But I do think the lack of density. We look around where I live in the Oak Bay municipality, the lack of the ability to build granny suites and to build basement suites up until this year, has not created a growing stock of housing
Right.
in this city. And I
Yeah.
think the latest moves by the government and both in Victoria, who also have to be complimented on the way they've changed their zoning and the way they're really pushing forward high density housing. We're starting to see that change, and
Right.
so I think it's just really happening now. But it's it's going to be 3 or 4 years before all of this potential and all of this is built out. So yeah. So has it historically been bad at UVic? I suspect so.
Yeah.
Well, let me flip it back to you.
Yeah,
How's housing
absolutely.
for you? How did you find housing when you came here?
Well, I started on residence,
Yep.
so I took a gap here. So
Yep.
I had a guaranteed spot, which I
Yep.
was lucky about. But I know my year in 2021 was, I want to say that the height of it, because obviously things
Yeah.
are still bad, but it was a problem with the first years.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky to get a spot. And then my second year, I've moved to a place that I've been since, and I've been really really fortunate to obviously have support from my parents to pay for it, and I got lucky in finding a place.
Yeah.
But I know so many stories of people that just don't know where to go.
Yeah.
It's hard you can't find places online, and
Yeah.
it's just really scary,
Yeah.
honestly. But I've been really lucky, thankfully.
And
But,
I guess the university hears all the time from those students, and we try to do things.
yeah.
But are students actually collectively trying to do things and working with property owners and landlords around here? Is the real estate club actively engaged in looking at solutions to housing to help students out? Or?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, a big thing we do. Obviously, with the new bill passed, there won't be a need for hearings for developments in Victoria.
Yeah.
But up till this point, we've been advocating for developments that are in favor of students,
Yeah.
and are
Yeah.
helping out students in certain ways. And it's made a good impact. The Bayview development just got approved. We were a large
Yeah.
part in speaking up in
Yeah.
the hearings, and
Yeah.
we've been proud of that. And I think that's an angle we want to take for going forward.
Yeah. And I understand you guys have reached out to developers in town and had discussions. Have you ever talked to them about, hey, could you focus on building student housing? Have you had any, I guess, good reception about that? Or
To my knowledge, I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, like one of the big things that we're trying to do is just making sure that we're advocating for what students are interested in. I think students have so many different diverse perspectives, whether it's on campus, off campus, wanting to live in something that the university is providing or what other people provide. I think for us, it's really just trying to amplify that student voice and get more involved where possible. I think what Aidan was talking about specifically with some of the projects that we've been involved in, I think it's really important that our perspective is heard. I think we're an interest group, and just not the club in general, but just students specifically. We're people who have a unique perspective on what it's like. I mean, I'm from Toronto. I came to Victoria to study here, and I have been fortunate to find housing, but there are other people and other students who aren't quite as lucky. And I think for us, it's a big focus in the real estate club and just in general that we have a bit of a responsibility to advocate for what students want. So that's definitely something we try to do. We've spoken to some developers about the same concept that Aidan was referring to, where getting units devoted to students. And I'm very happy to hear that you've had good luck with that at the projects like the Grey Star and Harrison Street projects at Mackenzie and Shelburne. Like those are fantastic. And to hear that there's like student devoted units coming there is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, just to that, I think that's something that we definitely try to focus on.
And how do you go about hearing the student voice? What mechanisms do you use to actually hear what students want around housing? What type of housing, the cost, where it's located?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we launched sort of off of the real estate club, I personally launched something called the Student Housing Initiative, which tries to understand the student perspective across Canada, and we'll be launching another survey this March to sort of understand that perspective a bit more and try to reflect a little bit on how student voice and student opinion, I guess, has changed year over year. Because, at the end of the day, it's like an evolving world. As Aidan's been talking about these like new legislations that BC's passed down and the new loan program that the government of Canada has talked about. And, one of the exciting parts about that is private developers can access lower cost loans for student housing as well. And I think hopefully that can maybe shift the needle a little bit where they want to build student housing more. I think one of the issues in Victoria, and honestly in like Western Canada specifically, is all of the student housing or all of the purpose-built student housing is done by universities. So the fact that we can try to create partnerships or try to create opportunities where an actual university can work with a developer to create an opportunity that is actually attractive to students is definitely a huge focus for the Real Estate Club and the Student Housing Initiative, and just all of us students who are interested in housing at large. Like, that should be a big focus for us, is trying to incentivize people to build with us in mind. I think that's like the end game, honestly. Like, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question as commerce students. So, in commerce, you're taught to, run your business, go make some money. Let's say you get involved in real estate in your careers. Are you going to remember your roots and
absolutely,
and provide low-cost housing for students and people that need low-cost housing? Or are you going to provide high-value, high-cost housing to make the most money you can in your corporation?
I can only speak for myself, and I'd hope the rest of the BCom students out there. Yeah. But absolutely. I mean, for me, it's not about getting the most money in the world.
Yeah.
The idea of having a bunch of students that have a place to live and a place to be and feel valued, that's what matters to me. Yeah. If I were in the real estate world, I hope, and that's one thing I love about UVic, is that we are really pushing for that sustainability lens, Indigenous lens. We're really pushing for people to feel valued and it's not just about making money.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
That's really good to hear. It sounds like the future is going to be in a good place. I'm actually really impressed. I met Julian last year and impressed what the Real Estate Club has done.
Thank you.
University. Who knew we had a real estate club at the university? I didn't know until he walked in the door, and it's great to see what you're doing. The survey you did last year was fantastic, and the fact you're doing it again is great. So, yeah, well done.
Well, thank you very much. I think we'll wrap there. I think that's a place,
good place to wrap.
So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.